Hello, this is Joe Johnson, and this is another episode of completing NOS130 Labs. Today we'll be working on Lesson 8 Labs, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I've logged into the Online Labs portal, and the first thing we want to do according to the instructions is to log into Workstation Member B. So let's click on that workstation. And it wants us to log on as administrator. I'm going to log in with the password capital P A $$ W0RD. So it's the same password we've been using for all the rest of the labs. Now that we're logged in, we want to edit some group policies. The group policies are going to allow us to control Internet Explorer so that we don't have to walk around to every machine and change the settings on every machine in the organization. So it saves me a lot of time. So what we're going to do throughout this entire exercise is lock down a few settings for Internet Explorer that typically gets our users in trouble. So we're going to scroll over to Administrative Tools. Now remember, I'm still logged into a Windows 8 workstation. So this is like a computer that's part of the domain. I'm not on the domain controller itself. Typically we'll load these tools on an administrative workstation, my workstation in the IT department, so I can remotely configure this server. So I'm going to click Administrative Tools, and then I'm going to click on Group Policy Management. Now this Policy Management console is going to look a little bit different than the one we used in the last lab, because we use this Group Policy Management console to control the group policy for the entire domain. And I think in the last lab we did a little bit with it, but in previous labs we've just edited the local policy. Now we're going to be editing the policy for the entire domain. So the place that we want to apply the policy is going to be under your domains, under a datum, in an organizational unit called restricted. So typically what we would do is set our policies for this restricted OU and then add our users to the OU, and then that would mean that that policy would apply to those users. As you can see, we already have a group policy object similar to the one that we created last lab. We're going to edit that policy for this lab and add some Internet Explorer settings to it. I'm having a little bit of latency issues. Notice my connection is red. It's telling me that my latency is 1800. That just means maybe my internet at home is a little bit slow, or maybe there's some heavy traffic on the network. So most of the time, if you're not on at peak hours in the middle of the day, this will be yellow or green. For right now, it's red, but I seem to not be having too many problems with the online labs. So we're going to open up the Group Policy Management Editor, and I'm going to maximize it so it covers my entire screen. In order to change these policies, we're going to go into the User Configuration under Policies, Administrative Templates, Windows Components. I'm going to have to slide this over a little bit so that we can see what's going on, and then Internet Explorer. These are going to be all the settings inside of Internet Explorer that users usually click on to change. We can manage them all from here, lock them down, disable them. We can do a lot of stuff with Internet Explorer. It's very highly customizable. There's an option that we're interested in. It's called Do Not Allow Users to Enable or Disable Add-ons. We are going to enable this policy. And what that does is it stops users from loading maybe add-ons that will harm the computer or lead to data loss. So maybe some spyware or some quick search bars. Typically the search bars that you download do some kind of spying where it sends information back to the publisher of the software. So we're going to disable that so our users don't get involved in anything like that. The next setting we're going to change under the Internet Explorer container, we're going to look at compatibility view. So this is a compatibility view container. So it's not a setting, it's like a subsetting. And then there's an option that says turn on Internet Explorer standards mode for local intranet. And typically we leave that on and it'll render any local applications in the older version of Internet Explorer until we can upgrade it. In this case, we've already upgraded all of our applications. So if Internet Explorer were to render the application in an older version of Internet Explorer, it might break it, or it might lead to some security problems. So we're going to disable this. That way, all of our intranet applications are actually rendered in the latest version of Internet Explorer. Typically, when we're troubleshooting a person's Internet Explorer or some problems they're having on the internet, it's very helpful to be able to see where the user's been. So maybe if they get a virus or some spyware, we can go back through the history and find out exactly where that software came from. So maybe we can block it at our firewall or proxy server. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the Internet Explorer container. We're going to look in the Internet Explorer container, and there's a container called Delete Browsing History. We're going to double click on there, and we're going to say prevent deleting website the user has visited. That way we can always see what websites the user's been visiting, and maybe where they might have picked up that add-on or spyware that they got on their machine. We're going to say enabled and OK. So if we look under Internet Explorer container, we also see a container that is called privacy. The lab wants us to change some of the settings under there. We're going to turn off in private browsing. So turn it off in private browsing removes that option from the Internet Explorer. And we might want to do that because maybe we want to find out where the employees have been during the day while they're at work. Maybe that's a function of the security policy you have, that they not surf certain websites, or maybe you want to find out what the employee's been doing with their time. What you can do is turn off the in private browsing, and it will stop them from opening up a browser that doesn't record their actions or their browsing history. So if we're going to turn off the ability for them to delete the browsing history, we might as well turn off the in private browsing also, because what they'll do is they'll figure out that they can use in private browsing and not be the websites where they've been won't be tracked. Once we do that, we've made all of the changes that the lab wants us to make. So we'll close the Group Policy Management Editor. Now we can see this is the policy we edited. If we want to quickly see all of the policies that have been set in this object, we can click on the Settings tab. Once we do that, we can click and it'll actually just show us all of the policies that we've modified. So notice in the other window, we saw everything, all of the options. Here we're just going to see the things that we've changed. So it's a quick way to find out what policies have been set in this object. If you're doing this lab and you need to screen capture, this is the screen that the lab wants you to do the screen capture for. That is the end of exercise 8.1. Exercise 8.2, we're going to test to see whether the policies, who they apply to, and if they were actually enforced. So what we're going to do is we're going to use another administrative tool called the Active Directory Users and Computer Snap-in. While the Group Policy Management Editor allows us to change group policy, the Users and Computer Snap-in allows us to edit, add, and delete users from the domain. So we're going to create a new user that this policy applies to. We're going to right-click the restricted OU because that's where we set the policy. We're going to say new user. The user's name is going to be user. Last name is going to be 1. User 1 for the logon name also. Next, we're going to set the password to the same password we've been using the whole time, PA $$W0RD, PA $$W0RD. We're going to clear the checkbox that forces them to change their password. And we're going to click the checkbox that says the password never expires. We're going to hit next. So now we're going to go ahead and log in as that user to see if the policies actually took effect. I'll switch back to my start menu on my user icon. I'm going to say switch account, and I'm going to flip over to that user account I just created. So the user I just created, remember, is user 1. So we're going to log in as adatum / user 1, and the password we set was PA $$W0RD. The computer's going to sit here for a minute and build our profile. So while we're watching this video, while I'm trying to log in, Windows is actually creating a local profile for me. If you've ever wondered why this video plays every time you log in for the first time, this is what it does while it's building your local profile. So I'm going to flip over to the desktop. Once I'm on the desktop, I'll open up Internet Explorer. We'll look at some of the settings that we changed in group policies. Typically underneath the safety option in the menu, you'll have an option to set up in private browsing. Notice that's gone. Notice under delete browsing history, we can click on there. Notice our history box is grayed out. So we can delete cookies, temporary internet files, download history, passwords, but we cannot delete the history anymore because we have set that in the group policy editor, and it actually tells you down here, the end user, that some of the settings are managed by the system administrator, and that's why that one is grayed out. So indeed, it looks like the policies that we set have taken effect. There's another way we can check without logging on as a user to find out whether the policy took effect or not. I'm going to show you how to do that right now. We're going to flip back over to the Start menu. We're going to log back in as administrator. Once we're logged in, we want to flip back over to the Group Policy Management console. Notice at the bottom of the Group Policy Management console, we have an option called Group Policy Results. This is how we can test what policies will take effect for which user and what computer they log into. So we're going to right click it and we'll say Group Policy Wizard. We'll click Next. We can select whichever computer we want to simulate the user logging into. For this exercise, we're just going to say they're logging into this computer we're sitting at. And the person that's going to log in is going to be user 1. So we're going to see what happens with group policy when user 1 logs on to this specific workstation that we're sitting at. After it's finished building that report, we can click on Details. Under User Details, under Administrative Templates, Settings, Policies, Administrative Templates, we can click Show, and we can see that the policies that we set indeed apply to this user. If you're completing your lab for class, this is where you want to take your screenshot. If you want to do the lab challenge, and it's pretty easy. What the lab challenge wants us to do is disable the Internet Explorer 7 compatibility mode. We're going to go back to the same place we were. Remember, all of the Internet Explorer settings are all in the same place. So we're going to hit Edit. If you remember, under the first exercise, we went under Policies, Administrative Templates, Windows Components, Internet Explorer, Compatibility View, and there's the option we want right here. The exercise wants us to turn off Internet Explorer Standards mode. So we will hit Disabled. So as you can see, changing the settings for Internet Explorer on one computer or maybe 100 computers is very easy using Group Policy Management Console. So that should be the end of your labs. I'll see you in class.